Lucas Parling is on the front line of Australia's insatiable need for new homes.
We have 10 carpenters working. We have an office staff of 3, and we have anywhere, but at any one point we sometimes have about 6 projects in tender and 3 or 4 projects under construction.
One of his frustrations, the complex and shifting rulebook.
Compliance and all of the paperwork that is associated with it, it just slows things down. So the more back and forth we need to have, and the more sort of open-ended questions we have as we move from one area to another, it can definitely slow things down.
While tradies are out on the tools, the burden of compliance is met by office staff hired specially to deal with paperwork.
So having systems in place to actually be able to do that off-site is key. But then also there's cost and inefficiency associated with that, and that's always going to drive up the cost of the build as well.
In a new report, the federal government's research and advisory body says it takes much longer to build a home than it used to.
Looking at standalone built houses, the average time to build a house from woe to go has increased from about 6 months 10 years ago to 10 months. So often that will be tied up in the development approval process.
It's not just houses. New townhouses now take an average 3 months longer to build, and apartments are built in about 28 months compared to 18 months 10 years ago. The Productivity Commission report says there's a mix of reasons, but the most significant is red tape.
In every stage of the building process, we've added to the regulatory burden, and so time taken to get the various approvals actually takes up a lot longer than it used to, and indeed most of the time to build houses is now spent getting approvals.
So why is the pace of building critical? Because governments are trying to tackle housing affordability by building more homes quickly. The goal is 1.2 million over 5 years, and right now we're falling short of the target by 250,000 homes.
Most of the building at that time, back in the 70s and 80s, there was only a building application. A building application was something that you lodged over a counter and got stamped. It was done.
David Springett has been a practising architect for 50 years. The planning process was once much simpler.
We would take it to council. We would meet somebody at council. They would look at the drawings and they would say, oh, look, this is looking great. Lodge it as it is. And you could do it that same day.
Now, it's complex.
We've got 20-odd jobs on the drawing board. Half of them are waiting for council. And then once council comes back to us, then we've got to process it and then put it back to council, and then we wait again. The whole thing's a waiting game. Why? What happened to that clerk at Botany Council who stamped it? Can we have him back again, please?
No one's suggesting that this should be a sector with no regulation. Clearly it's very important that we have certain safety and quality standards. But what we've seen is a proliferation of different policy objectives. We've seen local councils, different states taking different approaches, and we've ended up with a very complex regulatory soup.
The delays aren't due only to the planning process. The Productivity Commission says the construction industry has been slow to innovate and use digital technology and quicker processes like prefabrication.
We still largely build houses the same way we did 100 years ago. And the sector also faces some pretty substantial workforce challenges, getting and retaining the skilled trades that are needed to build. So those factors together have led to, what's a pretty poor productivity outcome for the sector.
We estimate there are hundreds of thousands of people we need to enter into the industry, and that doesn't even count the uplift we will need if we're really going to build that 1.2 million target that governments have set themselves.
The peak body for builders says young people aren't encouraged to study a trade.
Until such time as schools and careers advisors treat trades as a good pathway, as an equal pathway, other than just university, then we are going to continually to be in this problem.
CEO Danita Warne says the problem can be fixed by training Australians and increasing skilled migration.
We are strongly urging both major parties to consider, give trades a chance, stop them being treated as second-class citizens.
Danielle Wood says it's vital to acknowledge the cost of constantly adding new rules and complexity to an overburdened system.
I think the way that we really shift that mindset is a recognition that we now have very slow, very expensive housing. If we want to turn that round, we need to look at the set of regulation with that in mind and be constantly focused on this question of how do we make sure that we have the supply that we need so that all Australians can access affordable housing.